and welcome back to Connecting Clarkston. Katie and I are really excited because we're about to sit down and interview the mayor of Clarkston, Mr. Eric Haven. But first, we would like to update you on a few things happening.
So first off, we just wanted to mention that the box office at Pine Knob is now open. We believe that opened on May 8th. Open Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. I know we've heard lots of people complaining about having to pay fees when ordering tickets, so that is a nice little perk of living in this area, is just being able to run into the box office right there on Bob Seeger Drive. And then Mother's Day is coming up, and Ann and I have compiled a list of some of the best brunches in our area if you're looking for somewhere to take your mom, or if you are a mom, somewhere to go this weekend. So just check our Facebook page or Instagram for that list.
And the other thing coming up, May 23rd, is the graduation for Clarkston High School's class of 2023 at Pine Knob. So we're all looking forward to that. And then our guests for June, we're very excited to welcome Chelsea O'Brien from the Clarkston Family Farm and Derek Smith from Independence Township Parks and Rec. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Hi, welcome to the third episode of Connecting Clarkston. Katie and I are very excited today because we have a very distinguished guest here with us, the mayor of Clarkston, Mr. Eric Haven. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming to chat with us. We're very excited to just kind of talk about all things Clarkston with you.
Wonderful.
So thank
One
you
of my
so
favorite
much.
subjects.
One of your, well, sorry, I just kicked you. Before, as we were walking in, I know you've lived here a long time because your son Chris and I went to elementary together, Clarkston L, 80 something or other. So I know you've been here that long, but I think you've been here even longer. And so how did you and your family end up here?
It's an interesting story. I never heard of Clarkston before 1968. I met my wife at Central Michigan University, Nancy, in 1968, and we were there 1 year together, but then we both went to different schools together. She went to Grace Hospital School of Nursing in Detroit, and I went to U of M in Flint, and I graduated from there. She graduated from Grace Hospital. And so we got married in 71, and we moved to Clarkston in 73. I had some educational stint in Philadelphia in between after graduating from U of M, and then we moved here in 73, and so we've been here ever since.
How did you pick Clarkston? How did that come up?
Well, again, it was her hometown.
Oh,
she came here as a freshman in high school in 1964, and so it had been her hometown. So she's lived here longer than I have, for sure.
Wow.
So.
The high school at that time was where?
It was the one over off Walden toward the back. It wasn't the oldest one. That's where Renaissance is now. That's junior high now. But Renaissance High School. But it was the one with it was kind of modern in its day, those sweeping lines and so on. Back there, big kind of a Quonset look, to it.
The current junior high?
Current junior high, yes.
Yeah.
I didn't know when that school became the high school.
I'm not sure either.
Okay.
On our last episode, that we were talking about the renovation that's happening coming up with the current junior high, and my request I put in, I don't think it was honored, is to put those buttresses back.
Yes.
Oh,
that the original high school had. I think they aren't going to do that.
No. Architect isn't
If
listening.
we talk about it enough, maybe.
Maybe just get the buzz going.
Just podcast will do that.
Yes.
Guaranteed. Oh my gosh. Well, so I know you had mentioned Chris is over in Grand Rapids.
Yes.
But is Carrie's
here. She lives on Main Street with her husband,
really?
Brad Strickland. He works for General Motors, and they've raised two daughters there. And the first one is at Liberty University in Lynchburg. We were just there because they bought a condo there because their second daughter is going to go as well. So they're going to make an investment there. So the two girls can live there, and then they'll rent out to, I think, two or three other girls while they're there. So they can kind of make an investment and have a return on that investment while they're there.
Very cool. We talked to a lot of people who are lifelong residents, and like my dad, for example, 5 of his kids have moved back, and just the idea of people moving back, and our kids as they grow up, we think about, are they going to move back? Are they going to, seek out other places?
Right.
And what is it that pulls people back? I mean, do you think you'll ever get Chris and his family back here?
Probably not. Again, when they relocate and they find their subsistence, their livelihood somewhere else, it's harder to do that. Yeah. I'm like you. I see a lot of returns for sure, because Clarkston is a delightful place to live. There's no question about it. But some children, offspring, want to seek warmer climates or something. You know, they.
Right.
And during COVID, my wife, or my daughter rather, and her 2 daughters, moved to North Carolina to find a pool, because if you're in swimming, they're in competitive swimming. If you don't keep training, you know, you're out of it pretty quickly. So they had to find and so they went down to Cary, North Carolina, and spent 6 months there in a private pool situation so they could keep training. But in that amount of time, those girls fell in love with a warmer climate, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll see where they end up.
Yeah.
But my grandfather, ironically enough, had his farmer farms not too many miles away from Cary in Kernersville, North Carolina, in the day. So it's like a complete circle coming back, really, for our family. You don't expect those things; you never know they're going to happen. But
Right.
man, it's amazing.
That's very cool. So we talked about, or maybe before we came on here, we talked about the charm of Clarkston and how we maintain that charm, and like people coming back, people moving away and coming back, and like what makes it so unique. And you talked about how you love talking about Clarkston, and what do you think it is that makes Clarkston a special place to raise a family and to live?
I think it's becoming more and more special, given the world we're in. The world we're in is increasingly more tense. Let's use that term.
Yeah.
And Clarkston, and that's one of the objectives long term, we could talk about that more, about the future, but of keeping that quietness here. I used the word charm a long time because I saw it as, when I ran for mayor for the first time, I tried to find common values of the people and just be able to describe them, because in our diverse culture, it's hard to find a common value system, okay? Right. But in Clarkston, I think there is that, and I think there's a tranquility piece here that people love, along with the quaintness, which perhaps that equation comes out to be charm, you know, in the end. I used that term with a person here a couple of years ago, and they said, "Oh, you got to be kidding! Charm? What's charm? You know, that's elusive." And I said, "Yeah, it is, but in Clarkston, you can cut it with a knife. I mean, it's real.
Yeah.
Charm is a real thing here." People refer to their own place where they live in those words. It's charming.
Before we started filming, I know you were talking about the size of Clarkston. Can you state those facts again, just size-wise compared to Independence Township?
Sure, it's very interesting to think about, and these kind of things I kind of learned. I've been in council for many years. I was on council 30 years ago when we became a city. I was a very young man, didn't really know what was going on at the time. I learned a lot since. But becoming a mayor, I've learned a lot more about the village per se. And it was 30 years ago we became a village. We just celebrated that last summer, our 30th birthday.
Became the village, not the city of the village?
I'm sorry, we became a city 30 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for
So it still is called the city of the village, correct?
It's called the city of the village,
Okay.
and I wondered about that too. Many people say, why can't you get your name right? You know, kind of thing. But the name is purposeful, and it was. I remember that meeting where that came up. Why are we calling it that? And the answer to the question is we became a city to remain a village, because the city helped us determine our own future, become self-determinative and self-governing in that sense. Otherwise, we would have been rolled over by a very larger community on the outside of that. We'd have lost our identity in many respects, and perhaps some of the things we value would have not been valued by that larger community. So the city gave us that protection. You know, but that's not to say we wanted to lose the village charm. So we are the city of the Village of Clarkston.
It's not confusing at all.
And did I hear it's the smallest city?
We're the smallest city in the state of Michigan by size. I don't think
Okay.
we are by population, but by size we are, or by fiscal budget probably. But we are by actual geographical size.
And then I think I heard you saying some interesting statistics as far as like 50% residential, 30% water, 6%.
You've been listening outside of our
I
conversation.
know,
you
the
do.
numbers.
I don't know if those
You
are
missed them,
still
but
the
let's do
same. Yes.
Well, that brings me to another interesting point, and you can learn all these facts by looking at our master plan. And that's
Okay.
what master planners do when they put the thing together. They characterize your community, you know. And I'm coming off of the last master plan we did, or last recreational plan we did 5 years ago, and that was to say that there are round number 900 plus homes here in the village. No, I'm sorry, 900 plus people, 450 homes. Okay, so that characterizes the 1/2 square mile of Clarkston, the city of the Village of. Then outside of that is the township, and the township is 36 square miles. So we're 1/72nd of the township.
Okay.
If you do the
That's
math.
some good math, yeah.
And the school system's 58 square miles. So Clarkston, the Clarkston name goes that far.
Yeah.
And even farther, I think, and again, you don't know where these borders all are, but we represent 2 zip codes, 48346 and 48348. That's all Clarkston. So people get their mail and it says they have a Clarkston mailing address on it. So to them, they live in Clarkston, even though they may live way out from the village itself or the city itself.
Right, that's interesting. And so thinking of the city of the Village of Clarkston and the official business, now that you're the mayor and have been for a little bit,
It's my 5th year.
Fifth year?
Yeah, second.
so
third
where
term.
did the motivation and inspiration to become the mayor come from?
You know, it's interesting from my standpoint. It's kind of a challenge. What can be accomplished, and can we centralize on a value system that we all adhere to? And we alluded to a little bit in our previous conversation before going on air that it's hard for people with the busyness of their lives to think about the future of where they live.
Yep.
It seems like it's impossible to grasp or to affect, perhaps. They don't know where to start.
Yeah.
It's boring going to public meetings many times, and so they don't necessarily want to go there.
It's like
you know,
Katie was
and
talking
Yeah.
about before.
Katie was yeoman service here with the
Yeah,
with the
5
school
hours.
board, 5 hours of school board.
Yep.
That's amazing. And I have to sit through all of those and really officiate all of them for the ones we do at the city level. But it's kind of like one of those things that's a necessary cost of getting a value at the other end. You have to say, is it worth it? And to me, again, it's not for everyone because especially with stage of life, and you all are probably experiencing this too, and I know your dad has experienced it, Katie, and with being on council.
Right.
And him being in retirement, like I am, now you have some time to give back that you didn't have when you were raising kids and going through all that. So I'm very sympathetic to that. But at the same time, it's important to capture leaders who own the values for the future. And then there needs to be education because what's lacking in almost every institution, especially with a fast-changing society like we're in, there's no institutional memory. There's no what was yesterday. We don't know because you didn't live it.
Right.
You know, so the older generation can bring some of that institutional memory to it, and then coupled with the younger enthusiasm and so on, and ideas and technology and all those things, it can be a dynamic,
Right.
a marriage, if you will, of generations. And
Yeah.
so that's what excites me, I think, about this.
Okay.
Looking forward, how do I find young leaders who I can ask if they would just sit on a council or a board or something like that for a time being and begin to learn and then begin to appreciate. And many of them step back, they said, I had no idea. You know, they
Right.
don't because they go to work, they come home, they're going to raise their kids and all. They don't know what's going on. So
Right.
unless you sort of reach out, unless you venture out some and begin to serve in some capacity, you don't have the awareness of what's going on.
Well, and I think that's very true. And when my dad was on here talking about some of the organizations he's been involved in and the community groups, and one of actually just ran into Gary Call on the way in, the high school principal, and I said, hey, come on to our podcast next. But he was talking about, my dad was just here, and he has the biophilic team, and he has the high school environmental club that they're involving.
Yes.
They are involved in it as well. But when he was sitting here, he was talking about how it is hard to get younger people involved. And it was just kind of reminding me of when we were chatting in the, whatever you want to call it, vestibule before about social media and how sometimes you have to meet people where they are, and maybe that's the way to get some of the younger people involved with this. And I think the township just approved a social media coordinator or something to get their word out, and maybe this, I don't know what the city of the village does to maybe engage some of the younger people to know what's going on first, and then to be able to, get involved where they can.
I want to do much more with this, and maybe you all can help me with it some too, and making those connections, moving down the road. There's a real need for us to connect, and how that can happen. Jim's entree is one of the reasons I like what your dad is doing, and is that he's trying to capture next generation with a concept that I think they're interested in, which is environmental. I
Right.
think there's a great interest in environmental. I always say basically there's 2 themes in Clarkston as I see them. One is our environment, because you asked me about stats, we are 53% residential in that 1/2 square mile.
Wow.
We are 20% water.
Okay.
So 73% of our landmass there is houses and water. And many of those houses are around that water. And so that water becomes our very natural environment in which we love. We recreate in it, we enjoy looking at it. It becomes the charm, part of the charm of our community. And so if that is neglected, then we suffer from that. So, but without deliberate actions, and those actions take a long time. Your dad's really aware of this. It's 1 inch at a time sometimes, and making sure those things are protected. So I should really say there's two themes here. I think preservation is common to both of them. One is preservation of our environment, and the other is preservation of our history. Because we are a historic mill village. Yeah. You ask about that a little bit, how these towns came to be, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's part of what we've wanted to accomplish with the podcast. I know Ian especially has like big interest in the historical end of it, but it does feel like just having an opportunity to talk to people who do have a lot of experience, and just hearing what they have to say and the information they have to share. So.
And little stories here and there. And
Yeah.
because we were talking about, speaking of history, the Rudys, we'd love to get an update on what's happening with Rudys.
Yeah.
And that's even just that one store has a ton of history.
Oh, it does.
in the
Like, I think
town.
everybody has memories,
Yeah.
as a child.
It's iconic.
Yes.
Yeah.
It
Rudys
is.
is iconic.
And I think that's what I like what you were talking about, how you have to keep passing that history along. That, everyone has to have their own little torch to carry. And so hearing the stories is really part of what I think is valuable about, and we appreciate you sitting down.
Yes.
So I guess we could even talk about that right now if you'd like.
Sure.
What is happening with Rudys?
Matter of fact, when you prompted me, I've been in touch with Robert Isaki, who's the owner, for quite some time in this pilgrimage, if you will. It's been 2 years, I think, already that he closed it. And then he purchased the Clarkston News building adjacent to it. And we thought he might want to do something in combination of the two buildings, and that really is what he wants to do. So I think he's not going to totally lose the market feel, the little market, small town market feel, but that it wouldn't sustain the business over the long haul. Okay. So he's planning 2 fine restaurants there, and he has one of the best architects in the country.
So 2 restaurants,
Two restaurants
in there and the
will come.
market.
And a market semblance of some kind of I can't speak for him. We won't know all the facts. He's going to announce it pretty soon, though.
Okay.
He told me that. So I texted him this afternoon.
Yeah.
I just said, what shall I tell him? He said, opening next August. He
wow.
said, okay. And starting construction in the next couple of months here.
Okay.
So we're going to see activity, some beehive stuff going on down there,
Okay.
so it'll be fun to watch.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Do we know what kind of restaurant? Or is he not revealing
He's
that
not,
yet?
no, I don't. I've heard rumors, but I wouldn't want to, again, I don't think they're necessarily factual. I think he's still probably processing all of that.
Okay.
He has to fit within a community of other restaurants and
Yes.
find his place in that
Right.
community. So we have a diversity of restaurants here.
Yeah.
We're a destination for restaurants. For
Absolutely.
sure.
So I was listening to you talk also about what, like the paid parking, like how that benefits Clarkston. Could you give us just a little rundown on like how much revenue that brings in? And
Yeah, we learned quite a bit. We opened the Washington and Main lot here a couple of years ago, and then COVID hit, and we stopped the paid parking there just to help the businesses. We wanted to make sure that they have every opportunity to bounce back. But we reinstated it here a few months ago, and it was making us about $100,000 a year. That one parking lot at $1 an hour, starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, so and it was an experiment for us. We had to sort out what was the harm done and what was the value of it. It's a value proposition, so what's both sides of that? We found out from the immediate business district pretty quickly that they didn't want their businesses hampered in some respects. So some of the stores on Main Street, boutiques and shops and that sort of thing, they wanted to not have the parking during the day. So we decided not to start until 4 in the afternoon. So basically what we do is we capture the restaurant traffic. But the $1 an hour is not a whole lot compared to your $50 or $60 or $70 or $100 bill, for dinner. It's not much, but it does a huge amount for the infrastructure.
Yeah.
And the infrastructure, which is owned by the residents, basically, not Main Street, because that's M15. That's a state highway, but our other major and smaller roads in the village itself, we pave ourselves, comes out of our taxes and so on, and our parking lots and our curbing and all that stuff. Pave it, stripe it, just plow it, all of that. So if there's a way that those who use those things, which are outsiders typically, our parking lots, if they could help us maintain them. So that $1 an hour is a way to do that. So we're hoping that we'll at least double that revenue, which can be plowed back into our streets and so on over the long haul. So we can do what I say sort of euphemistically, like what the state of Michigan hasn't been able to do up to now, maybe without federal help, is we can preserve our own roads without having a deficit so. Roads are hugely expensive. I know it's millions of dollars per mile, these interstate highways and so on. So if we can maintain our own roads with our own revenue that we generate, which is non-taxable, it's not taxes. We want to not raise the taxes to the residents and yet maintain our roads. So that's one way of doing it.
What is the budget for Clarkston?
About 800,000 plus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're a small budget.
Right.
And so we don't want to hurt the residents. We want to keep our taxes from being raised if we possibly can.
Right.
And to have a gift like a destination. We are a destination.
Yeah.
The brand is huge, and it's far-reaching and it's desirable, and so people want to come to Clarkston. So that we just use that in a small way to help us augment, the infrastructure we have.
And not to just keep talking about parking, but how is the parking situation in Clarkston? Are there any plans for any change with parking, or everything seems to be working
we
well?
added a second lot
Okay.
here in the last few months, and that's the depot lot down by the City Hall and by Depot Park. And so we will institute June 1st, we'll institute paid parking there as well. And so that will be that revenue increase, and we're actually budgeting that increase into our budget, which will help offset expenses for the roads there. And at the same time, because parking has been a very difficult subject over time, we've had parking committees that have sort of worn themselves out trying to get decisions made. And so we were able to, with council, make a decision here in the last few months to say we're going to take the next step. It was a positive move we did in Washington, Maine, and we think it'll be a positive move in the depot lot. So we made the decision, we're going to do it. And Jonathan Smith is our city manager, so he has the administrative responsibilities for all of these decisions. He makes the day-to-day decisions there. And so what I tried to help him do is form a parking advisory committee. And so that's made up of pretty much half. We started out with 2 residences and 2 business owners. And then some of the business owners wanted to join, but 2 of those business owners that wanted to join were also residents in the village. So it's a pretty equalized committee. They don't have decision-making power, but their advisory help is certainly helpful to Jonathan and to council then making decisions going forward. So as we use parking as I used to say you can't steer a parked car, excuse the metaphor. But once we do have the controls in place, then we can guide this thing. And so if we need to shut it down because of hard times or something, or a problem, or if we need to mediate it in certain locations, we can do that. Once you have the control, then you can do creative things. If you don't have the control, then you just have chaos. Then you have the complaints about parking.
Right.
We don't need complaints about parking. We need to manage what we have.
Got it.
That makes sense. When you were talking about the percentage of water in the city of the village, that's really impressive. And one thing we had talked about, my husband and I, is there ever a time that we could put a livery down? Has that ever been brought up down in Depot Park? People, enjoy the waterways. They connect to a bunch of different ones. It could be not a huge revenue source, but perhaps
You're getting even closer to my favorite thing to talk about.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
That's Depot Park.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
Depot Park is our major asset. I always say New York has nothing on us. We have a Central Park too.
Yeah, we do. That's true.
And it's
With an ice skating rink.
It's flourishing.
Yeah, ice
Gar
skating
Wilson did it years ago, where he did a lot of filling in down there. Again, this is part of the older history.
Yeah.
Sharon Catello, the previous city mayor and president, village president, has fond memories of that, and they commemorated him a couple of years ago there for starting the whole thing. But it's been an asset for us. It's a pedestrian community. We're like a 1/2 square mile. We have our sidewalks, and people love to walk their dogs and go down there. The Optimist Club has helped us a great deal in facilitating the playground there. Yeah. And we just a few meetings ago decided to name the playground Optimist Playground.
Oh, nice.
And so you're going to see that sign go up fairly soon. There's going to be a sign that says Depot Park, City Hall, and Optimist Playground.
Nice.
Going to go there. So that we're beginning to do the right things for people who've helped us all along the way there. But the mill race runs right through it. Mill race was dug by Henry Ford when he put his little shop in there, and it becomes the central waterway. And Jenny Schultz in the day, who lived on Robertson Court, who's moved up north now, but she masterminded and funded with the help of others the bridge that crosses that mill race. And then Bart Clark, the late Bart Clark, built a bridge at the south end with very, very similar bridges, beautiful bridges, which are great assets to that park itself, and give it the bones, if you will, of future development. We did a fundraising campaign a couple of years ago. We tried to get a grant from the state, but found there were too many strings attached to it to make it feasible for cash flow. So, but we did have $20,000 in cash, and we put that into new pathways in the park, new paved pathways around the playground and so on. And now we're starting a campaign to put 3 picnic pavilions in the park. But our ultimate dream is to your point about a livery and so on. Kids do kayak in that some now. The wetlands are protected by our environmental department, so Eagle and DNR and so on. But nevertheless, it's a natural waterway, and the DNR, and I'm learning more about this, they do want people to recreate in nature. All right, so there's that tension about how do you recreate in nature. So the hope is that, and this, I'm pulling a number out of my hat, but I'm saying it's $1 million project, to run a river walk that starts in the current used part of our park, which is only, I think, 20% of the park, run it from that, for the playground area, all the way down the mill race, parallel the mill race, all the way to Deer Lake Beach.
Oh, wow.
Okay, through the wetlands.
On that side?
Right on the maybe the north side then of the mill race. And so that's a biggie.
It is.
But you just start talking about it, and eventually, people get the idea and get the enjoyment of it, kind of thing, the thought. So we'll see where it goes. So you all can help me sell this, okay?
I mean,
Anna's on it.
I
for
love
sure.
that idea. Well, I know that there was a group that helped remove the Phragmites, and there's some invasive species removal and that kind of thing. And the Friends of Depot Park, is that who helped to fund the pathways? Is that same group?
Yeah, we did the grant,
and all that stuff. Obviously, there's interest, and everyone loves that park, and so I think that's a fantastic idea. So if we can help in any way, I mean, all of our listeners, I'm sure there's many.
Listeners, please.
Yes.
Be ready. But I think that's a great idea. But I understand what you're saying, how wetlands are protected, so maybe there's a balance between recreating and not too many people. We don't want boats, tearing through there.
Well, you won't be able to find much tearing through there, I don't think,
It'd be
but
hard
kayaks
to.
would be, that's the livery idea.
Yeah, if you can kayak super fast, I guess. I don't know. Gotta have some strong arms. But my kids definitely go from Middle Lake and try to get through there, and have gotten through.
Well, we're going to deputize them then.
All right.
Official champions. If we can get the kids mobilized, I think we can make these things happen, because the parents will follow.
Exactly.
I used to say every time a baby's born, 3 generations are affected immediately.
That's a good point.
Them, their parents, and their grandparents. They're all aboard. So
yeah, absolutely.
So it's fun.
Well, so you talked about a lot of different projects and organizations, but I'm sure there are others that we haven't mentioned that are really important that the city is, deeply involved with. Do you want to talk about some of the other ones?
Sure. We enjoy a really good relationship with Blue Heron Conservancy. It's what used to be NOHLC, North Oakland Headwaters, and the Clinton River Watershed has been giving us grants. I know Jim talked about the West Bank, the plantings along the West Bank, if you will. We have a West Bank here too. See that? In Clarkston, that's right. We're a very, very famous place. With a sign that points out all those native plants that we're trying to get to flourish in the way that they were designed to do. So Blue Heron is an advisory group to the city. And I would like to see us adopt an easement relationship with them, because if we do that, then we can capture their long-term interest. They've been very, very helpful historically, but that can reach a natural end unless we kind of capture that relationship. So I'm hopeful for an easement relationship with them in the near term.
How does that work with such limited, property that you guys have that the city owns? Isn't it all spoken for already, or?
Well, the property itself, the wetlands, is owned by the village. The property is part of Depot Park. But the management of that is dictated by the state, of course, by the environmental agencies and so on. So nothing really can happen there by state law, to disturb that. And the conservancies sort of parallel that emphasis in terms of stewardship.
Okay.
They come alongside, and they, I always say to the council and to the planning commission and the ZBA and all of them, I said, I don't think any of you want to go out there in the wetlands and identify where all the buckthorn is and all the phragmites are. But these people from the Conservancy do want to do that.
Right.
And I asked them, well, what's in this for you? They said, it's just like anything else. It's fulfilling of our mission. It is our mission to conserve and to be good stewards of our resources. So there needs to be an affiliation with the city in that respect that it takes that seriously.
Right.
And doesn't just take it for granted.
Definitely.
But,
well, it's like you said, the long term and 3 generations and thinking about the next one.
Oh, absolutely.
What
We have
we're
to think
leaving.
ahead. But if we don't, this goes to speaking about a future. You brought that up as one of your questions you wanted to talk about too. There's a friend of mine introduced me to a term several years ago. The term was your preferred future. He said, what is your preferred future? And I wonder how many people have ever thought about that. But the idea is if you can envision it, then you can work toward it.
Okay.
If you don't envision it, then just whatever happens, you end up fighting battles through your life and don't necessarily get anywhere that you might have otherwise wanted to get unless you had a focus somewhere down the road. So it's a question for the community, and that's why I try to establish, discover really core values of historicity and environmental. And I think those, everybody owns them. It's all part of our charm. We love our business community downtown.
Right.
We love our residential community. Those are part and parcel of who we are. So for the next generations, just to polish that, moving forward, I think. But how do we do that?
How do we do that? And is there, I mean, obviously we talk a lot about growth and evolving and the small town charm, but Clarkston, do you think it's the business aspect, for example, is there a cap? Is there a stated cap to how many businesses? Is there a ratio? How do you maintain that balance that we already have?
Yeah, there's that's really one of the reasons I ran for mayor, because I feel I learned, really, this is one of the things I've learned over the last 30 years, that zoning zoning sounds like a very boring subject. Okay, who wants to think about zoning? But we have a ZBA, a Zoning Board of Appeals, for people who might have a hardship with some of our zoning. But zoning is one of the biggest blessings a community has. And I always say it's just like your mom used to tell you, a place for everything and everything in its place. Okay. Without that, you have chaos and you have frictions, you have disputes and all kinds of things. So as long as you can define where things ought to be, and then you can preserve that, then you have a solidarity, you have tranquility, you avoid conflicts and those sorts of things. But if you begin to relinquish those, in other words, if there's strong either outside or inside influence to change those rules that have been put in place, then you lose with the courts. You lose your integrity. They say you weren't serious about your zoning. You relinquished it here, here, and here, so you've lost your precedent, so people can come in and do what they want then. Then you lose the integrity of what you have. So zoning is really critical. I don't know if I answered your question, but it's the tool.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were talking to that point earlier about the core values. So if you identify what those are, and as a group we decide these are our core values, and we stick to that, and as we envision our future, keeping those values in mind, that makes sense.
It's a hard line. Zoning is a hard line. So we don't allow business to encroach upon residential, nor vice versa in that respect. And if there's a hardship situation, that's why our Zoning Board of Appeals is in place, to hear those cases and to sort of adjudicate a difficult situation that might be there.
I don't know enough about this, but with the recent cannabis thing that just came up, was that part of the zoning?
It had zoning impact. It's very
Okay.
interesting what the people try to do who want to bring cannabis to our community. Both medical and recreational marijuana were legal, going into this last situation we were into. So it wasn't a matter of legality. It was a matter of again, zoning, like you're referring to. The question is not do you want marijuana? That question is already answered at the polls long ago. The question is, do you want it near your house? Okay, and what they try to do is they try to strong arm the community with a proposal that, very interestingly, we were hit with in July of last year, and we had no ability in the courts to make that those who wanted to bring cannabis to our town, make them go through due process, because due process said they had to go to the Attorney General and the Governor and so on. It was going to take more time than it would take to get on the November ballot. but they sued. And we appealed it twice and lost in the courts. So our city attorney says, I can't help you with this in the courts. Said, you have to go to the electorate. So it was a very hard fought campaign, you know, but it turned out that 82% of our people voted that they did not want cannabis here. Now, the issue was not just two cute little pot shops, you know, downtown. That wasn't the issue. The issue was they wanted to rewrite our charter. Our city charter is like our Constitution. They wanted to add section 616 to that charter, which would say that every other one of our charter regulations had to subscribe to theirs. So it was really a takeover. It was a hostile takeover of our city government.
And where were they coming from? It was not an inside
Well, it's interesting.
group.
It's hard to know because sometimes you follow the money and you're not sure exactly where it comes from. But we know that the two original canvassers who got the thing with the small towns, they were attacking all the small towns, Holly and Ortonville and some of these others, and Leonard, and I know, I'm trying to think, Brighton was one of them, went through it at the same time. They're small enough, it's easy to get 5% of the voters from the last election on a, what's the term I'm trying to think of, a petition. So you take a clipboard around, all right? So I think they needed 40 signatures in our little tiny town to get on the ballot. So they got the petition signatures, turned them in, and we had to honor that. But again, due process, it wasn't time for due process, but they sued for that. And so they forced it onto the ballot last November. And so that's why they don't do it in bigger areas. It's harder to get that small percentage of a huge, a lot larger electorate like a township, you know, onto a ballot. So they attack the small towns. But we pondered it a long time. Didn't take anything for granted to make sure. But the campaign was such that if you campaigned and said they want to change their charter, people go, oh, okay, what does that mean? You know, they don't. It doesn't have any impact. But the messaging was no store near my door. You know, and so that was the idea because the way they wrote their amendment to our charter was to say that if they didn't find the real estate they wanted in our business district, they could go anywhere. They could go into our residential communities. That's the thing that made the campaign possible.
Interesting. Okay.
So we're going to cross over that line.
Yeah. Well, controversy in Little Clarkston. Keeping things interesting.
So, but it was really endearing to, again, see those values come to the fore.
Right.
It's one thing to allow marijuana. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors. That's not our business necessarily. But to have it in your face, you know, people had to have a right to say no to that. And they did. They showed up and they said no in a big way.
Interesting.
The other thing I wanted to ask about was just an update on the mill pond and where that stands.
Mill pond is, again, water being so important as an asset for us, is we are a mill village. Butler Holcomb back in 1830 built the first earthen dam there, which washed out around 1940. And he started the village. I mean, the way you started villages, and a lot of these small towns around here are all mill villages. Because the idea is wherever water flows over a precipice, you can put a wheel in and you can cut lumber first. And you use that lumber to build your town. And many of the homes here in Clarkston, in the historic district and so on, were built with lumber from that original mill, original sawmill that Butler built. And then the Clarks came along and they bought it from him and they turned it into a grist mill eventually and grew grain and that sort of thing. Then these little lake towns became vacation destinations. Lake Orion's subtitle is Where Life is a Vacation. And you laugh at that. But you think about people coming out of the inner city and when they can hop on a train and get off at the depot, if you will, here in Clarkston, and come and you see these pictures in the restaurants and the barbershops and everything around town. These kids with the boats and the fishing poles and that kind of thing. This was a vacation place for them. So the town started out, you know, as a mill village in the day. And that is our history, but that's our historicity here. We have what's called an intact and contiguous historic district, which intact means it's still there as it was in the beginning, and contiguous, continuing, okay, together. Many communities have historic buildings. There's one over there, and one over there, and one over there, but what Clarkston has is an intact village, and that's what makes it so appealing. And back in the 80s, a group of people, very, very far-sighted people, saw what was coming because MDOT wanted to, like they did with so many of these villages, their objective was simply getting traffic from point A to point B. And so they wanted to put 4 lanes down through Clarkston, okay, which would have wiped out our town. And the only way to fight it in the day, because the historic value had become common in the country, then to begin to realize that these are our treasures, and we can't just let them go. So they took on the idea of starting a district, a historic district, and they plotted the four corners of it basically, and then kind of ran out of steam. But it prevented 4 lanes from going through downtown Clarkston. Now today we have a historic village study committee under Nancy Moon heads that up, and they're doing the research on the rest of the houses in that area. So all those homes eventually will be on the National Register of Historic Places. You know, it really makes us. It puts us on the map.
It's so interesting, and I know that some of the homes were on the Underground Railroad and part of that system, and I think there's such rich history, not just for our town, but for the whole
You can drill down
country.
into all this.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Where is a good place for people to get more info on Clarkston's history? What's your go-to?
Yeah, well, Historical Society's here.
Okay.
The Historical Society is very active. Jonathan Smith's the president, and Tony, his wife, runs the museum over there at the library,
Yep.
CIDL. So they have a wealth of information. They're somewhat artifact oriented in smaller things. The Historic District Commission protects our historic district by protecting the environment of the village itself, the external environment, the facades of the homes and the properties and that sort of thing, to keep them the way they were within the district.
Speaking of history and just kind of, I'm digging into, all things Clarkston. Are there any little tidbits, any little known facts that you can share that maybe people don't know about Clarkston that you can think of? Little hidden gems.
Hidden gems.
Like we had just shared on Facebook the other day, right?
About the old Township Hall, or
Yes.
it's now the Union Ad Works
Yeah.
building, how it used to be. They used to make
Ford Model
upholstery
T.
for the Ford
It was a
Model
cut and
Ts.
sew
Yeah.
plant for Henry Ford.
Yeah.
He was very active, if you study him, in innovative as can be. If you've seen this Innovation Nation on television now, Mo Rocca,
Yeah.
the Mo you know, kind of is fun. He does a lot of that in contemporarily, but again, it's based with the Henry Ford down in Dearborn and so on. We used to say most people have a spinning wheel or something in their antique. Henry Ford collected buildings from around the world. That was his antique collection down there. I don't know if I'm kind of wandering. I think here I'm on a rabbit trail,
That's
but
all right. You can tell us the secrets off
but
camera.
Henry,
Yeah.
I will. It's little things you look for them, and this I think is something I'd like people to think about. Look for the little hidden things. For example, near my daughter's house on Main Street, where the mill pond spillway, it drops into a creek that runs and connects to Park Lake, runs under Main Street. Along that easement there are concrete fence posts. Now, when was the last time you ever saw concrete fence posts? When Henry did things, he did them to last.
Okay.
All right, and so they are still there, to which would hold up his easement boundary in the day.
Can you see them still?
Oh, you can see them, yeah.
Oh, that's
Matter of fact, I posted it on my Facebook page a
fun.
while
Yeah,
back.
we'll go
I
share
just,
it.
We will share it. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's a million little things that are there.
Yeah.
And Facebook is a good place. I know Karen Nicholson, I don't know if you know Karen, but on Facebook, she puts a lot of cool stuff up there. Okay. And when you were asking me that question, I began thinking about it. Rudys is going to open next year in 2024. Rudy opened his original store in 1933. So if he opened it this year, it would be exactly, 90 years. So it's going to be 91 years that whole new thing happens from the time that Rudy
That's amazing.
started what he did. So
I
there's a
love
tidbit
that.
for you.
Yeah, I like
Yeah,
it.
we
I
like
like it. Well, you mentioned, what was her name, Karen? Is that her?
Karen Nicholson,
Okay,
yeah.
we'll have to take a look at her
Yeah.
info. But before we wrap up, we always like to ask our guests if they have someone they would like to nominate, someone they think would add value to our Connecting Clarkston podcast.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wondering if you have someone in mind.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a couple, okay?
Okay,
For
yeah,
just
of
so
course.
you can put this in your repertoire. The first one that comes to mind, of course, and I think he'd be a great interview candidate, would be Tom Lowry.
Oh, right.
Tom Lowry serves with us,
He's on the
with
list.
Jim, with your dad and I, on the Friends of Depot Park.
Yep.
And Tom is a can-do
Yeah.
kind of guy. He's part of the Optimists as well. And so he'll give you great insights.
Yeah.
And he's retired as well, but he was the Lowry Landscaping and so
yeah.
on. So he was involved in so much that went around around this town. The other one, Jonathan Smith, I think would be very interesting, our city manager.
Okay.
Because he sees the day-to-day
Yeah.
that goes on around here. So
That's great.
just take a,
I
ask
love
those
that.
guys. And
Yeah, Tom was on our list because I've known
he's a
him.
neighbor.
But
He's a neighbor,
he's a
sort
neighbor,
of.
yeah. But Jonathan, I hadn't thought of. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to come chat with us.
Oh, I love it. I'll do it
on this
anytime.
Monday
yeah.
afternoon. Oh, good. We'll have you back
There'll
again
be news,
then.
yeah, sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Thanks.
All
Excellent.
right.
This podcast is brought to you by Independence Television, located inside Clarkston High School. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Independence Television, Independence Township, or Clarkston Community Schools.